Welcome back. I'm here today with Konstantin Guericke, and he's one of the co-founders of LinkedIn and also a very active venture capitalist and mentor to startup companies in Silicon Valley. Konstantin, welcome to today's show.
Great to be here.
So, can you give me background of how you came up to where you are today and your very interesting career path in the companies?
Well, I grew up in northern Germany in a small town. My parents are both high school teachers, and I first came to the United States as an exchange student, kind of in 10th grade. Sometimes you spend a year with a family, so I lived in Pennsylvania. And I kind of saw how US colleges operated and was interested in that, so ended up applying to Stanford and was fortunate enough to get in and really enjoyed my time there. And at Stanford, a lot of it is about entrepreneurship, so I met some well-known entrepreneurs in some of the classes there. And decided I wanted to become one. I didn't have any money in the beginning, so I figured I'll work at some startups first before starting my first company. So that's kind of what I did.
And you currently work on campus with the new startups. Is it a program called StartX or?
Yeah, so StartX is an accelerator that started actually not by the university, but true bottom-up fashion by students themselves. So people apply kind of like with Y Combinator, but it's for Stanford. And Stanford is a nonprofit, so they don't take any equity in the company. So that's really nice. And then they work with people who mentor them. So I do that, as well as at the engineering school, there's 4 classes that teach entrepreneurship, and I mentor some of the student teams who are working on entrepreneurial projects there. They range from classes where students are trying to figure out whether to become an entrepreneur to those who are already committed and trying to move their company forward.
Now you've established a very strong presence in social media. How did that come about?
So I was always interested in the potential of the internet, how to connect people. In the beginning, a lot of people were looking at how can you buy things more efficiently, and to me that wasn't really that exciting. I was always interested in the connection between people, and eBay was one of the first companies I really thought wow, this is really interesting, where people can transact and buy things from each other even though they don't know each other. And so we just saw in the real world that there's 5 co-founders of LinkedIn, and we all kind of have the same observation, that there's the old saying, which is it's not what you know, but who you know. But actually, I think who you know is often kind of limited. When you need an investor or a business partner, it's usually not someone who you know. But it's often that someone who you know knows. So it's really who your contacts know. But there's no way to really see who your contacts know. It's hard enough to keep an address book up to date with people and their changes. And it's pretty much impossible to do that. And so that's kind of the inspiration for LinkedIn, to make that process more efficient while sort of making sure the social dynamics stay in place, which have been working for thousands of years.
So as a social architect, then, when you started on the LinkedIn project, did you have the vision that it would become what it has been today, or?
Overall, the goal was pretty much the same. If you look back to the first press releases, you don't spend a lot of time, fantasizing over the details, because, with every startup, there's a good amount of luck involved. Particularly, is this the right time to do it? If you're too early, it'll fail, and if you're too late, then someone else will succeed. But in general, it is kind of what we wanted it to be. Of course, we didn't know all the different features that exist today, but the basic thing of a network of people having their profiles and being able to know who's connected with whom and leveraging that to be more successful in your career as well as in your business is pretty much what we set out to do. And I think it's still work in progress. I think there's a lot of people who are not really using LinkedIn fully, and of course there's a lot of people who are still not on LinkedIn, so there's still ways to go, I think.
How did the 5 people come together for LinkedIn?
Well, we kind of just through relationships. So for example, Reed and I, we're both working in virtual reality, so we met at a panel of the Avatar conference in San Francisco, and a couple of them had worked before at another startup together, so it was through connections or introductions, just the way most things work.
So Konstantin, we're running up against the break time, so we need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages. I'm visiting here with Konstantin Guericke, and co-founder of LinkedIn. We'll be right back.
I love fishing, with my family.
I think it would be easier to use a net.
It was so much fun.
The times when we are together, it makes it all the more worth it.
Having Dad teach them how to like cast a fly rod. And
As long as we're doing stuff together, we're having fun.
Some people see a father and a son fishing together, while others see a succession plan. Welcome back. I'm here today visiting with Konstantin Guericke. He is one of the co-founders of LinkedIn, also works with the StartX program, which is the incubator for Stanford students. When you're working with these students there on campus, do you invest alongside them, or what typically is your relationship or your role?
Yeah, it's interesting. People have always, sought out, me for advice, as well as I, in the starting of LinkedIn and other things. I always ask lots of people about it, and so I'm used to that, and I'm available for people to do that. And it's only sort of when LinkedIn started becoming more successful, where after talking about their startup project, people would say, "Oh, and we're raising money. Would you be interested in investing?" And I never thought about it because actually at that time I still didn't have any money to invest. But I started thinking, so I had to kind of make a choice. And I felt that I wasn't really sure then, were these people really looking for my advice, or were they just sort of pretending to want my advice, but really just wanted to get money? And so I decided as a rule that I would not do any angel investing. That way I would know for sure when people come to me and they want to talk to me about advice, that's really about the advice, and that, that I can help them with that, and not about, asking for money. So I've clearly separated that. I do invest through the venture firm I'm associated with, Early Bird, but that's kind of a separate vehicle.
Let's go back to Early Bird Ventures. I understand that they're early startups, but they need to be in Europe.
That's right. Because in Europe, I feel like the fascinating thing for me is when you look at the startup environment in Silicon Valley, it's really quite mature, right? It started 40, 45 years ago, and there have been several generations of venture capitalists. I know you know some of them. And so I always felt like, okay, wasn't the time exciting in the early days with Fairchild and the first, when you had just like 5 or 10 VCs and you're still figuring out the right model? And, it was kind of too late for that. But when I look at the startup environment in Europe, it is kind of at that point. It's almost like you travel through history and time. There's just, in Germany, there's sort of less than a dozen VCs that are actively investing, and they're still trying to figure out the model, and the entrepreneurs are trying to figure out the model. So it feels like, the startup ecosystem is a startup, and that's really attractive to me because you feel you can shape it much more.
With Early Bird, is there a particular emphasis on the type of technology, or is it just any company?
Well, the company has done, so this is the 5th fund, so I'm not one of the founders. I came in at the latest fund where they made some changes, and one of the things they learned, they weren't so good at evaluating hardware opportunities, energy, and medical devices, so it's really all focused on software now, a mix between business software and consumer software. And then we typically invest at the Series A stage, which means a couple things have been validated, but still fairly early on in the process. So a typical first round would be anywhere between $2 and $6 million.
In the world economy today, we often hear in the news about Europe's, I guess the problems with the world economy together. But Germany always seems to be a leader over there in terms of kind of taking the first, the role to make sure that the economy is strong and helping out. Early Bird, is it focused primarily in Germany where it's based, or does it really matter where?
We have a strong presence, of course, since we're based in Berlin. In Berlin in particular is one of the most active startup hubs in Europe. Some would argue the most active. It's kind of competing with London as the 2 main hubs in Europe. And then there's a couple smaller ones, Barcelona, Amsterdam, and others. And so, but we invest in companies. We have several in our portfolio from Finland, from Spain, and so forth. So it's a mix. And the interesting thing is that the German economy, while it's very strong, there haven't been a lot of, world-class software companies that people in the US would know. SAP is probably the best known one, and that's already getting a little old. So, and sometimes the smaller countries actually have an easier time. Like Skype is from Estonia, or Spotify from, I think, Sweden, or so MySQL from Finland. So sometimes, so there's, I think, a real opportunity to figure out, how can we make those European entrepreneurs more successful.
Mm-hmm. So, how did you get involved with, the early bird venture capital? Are they typically coming to you to help raise money, or are you advising the fund and coaching the companies along?
Yeah, so I'm one of the partners, so I'm invested in the fund, and but I maintain a couple other activities like the mentorship, and I do some independent board seats. But my focus is really on helping our companies that we invest in Europe to succeed in the US market. Because the US market is usually the most competitive because there's a lot of financing available, there's a lot of entrepreneurs. And so it's very important to be the leader in your category. You have to usually compete in the US market, and you want to do it as quickly as possible, because once the US companies get very strong, it's very difficult to compete. So we really try to encourage our companies to, not sort of focus first on Germany and then be successful in Spain and Italy and other places, but really to, kind of like the Israeli startups, to be successful in the US market first, and then also to be able to raise follow-on financing here in the United States. Because there's just more money available at that stage. It's very difficult to raise the venture funds. I mean, we're one of the largest, but yet we cannot do the really large rounds that US funds do. And so in order to be successful, you need to, really raise more money typically.
I'm visiting here today with Konstantin Guericke. We need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
When I grow up, I want to work with very successful people.
I want to advise people so that they can pay less tax.
Hang out with my clients on the golf course.
Fishing.
And on their private yachts.
They will all be my friends too.
I want to work with the VCs who will fund the next Fortune 500 company.
When I grow up, I want to be just like my dad.
Money won't buy you happiness in life, but we can help take care of your financial affairs so you can focus on what's really important. Welcome back. I'm here today visiting with Konstantin Guericke. He is one of the co-founders of LinkedIn and also involved in a new venture. Well, you're involved in a lot of stuff, but we've been talking about early bird venture capital, which is focused on continental Europe and launching companies over there. When you compare U.S. venture capital markets to European, what are some of the differences that you see?
Well, Europeans are much younger, so there's not sort of that history, and venture capitalists haven't seen lots of billion-dollar exits, and so they're a little more cautious in general because they don't know if the exit is only going to be maybe in the $50 to $200 million range. Then you need to kind of get your companies. You can't invest as much money, and you also want to get more revenue earlier on. So that's sort of historically how it has been. They sometimes focus more on the European market because a lot of the US startups kind of neglect the European markets for a while. But increasingly, you have the entrepreneurs who've become successful, who built some kind of company that was the leader in a certain category, but only in Europe, and maybe had an exit, in that range. And now they're more ambitious. They want to really create sort of the next Skype or the next Spotify or something that comes from Europe but is a global success. Or like Israelis, like Waze is another company that everybody here in the US or a lot of people would know, but that comes out of Israel. So that's really, as a fund, we are supporting those entrepreneurs who have these global, ambitions. And what you really find as investors, it's often the few big successes are the ones that give you the good returns for your limited partners.
Do you see philosophical differences between U.S. and European entrepreneurs?
Well, I think one of them is the one I mentioned, that some of them just focus on Europe and they sort of play it safe because you can take sort of something that already works in the US and you do it for Europe. Those are not the ones that we work with. The global ones, I think, are quite similar. Now, there's some things where they don't have as long of a history of really letting everyone in the startup participate in the equity. Sometimes that's more just, for the management. But I think these days I find, there's so much information flowing through blogs and so forth. They read the same blogs and, they're really very similar. Where I do see a difference is in the consumers. So sometimes, Europe is not really a great place for early adopters, which is one of the reasons we look for European companies that are already successful in the US and Asia. but also ones who really focus on those areas, because European consumers are often a little bit take a wait and see attitude. And when you're trying to win and get something new into the market, that's not really that helpful to help you grow.
Social media, as you're looking at a social media architect, and you broke the model, I guess, is a disruptive model with LinkedIn and growing to the company that it has today. When you guys came together with that, did you envision it going so fast, so quickly as it had, or was there? What are some of the things when you look back that really differentiated that LinkedIn being a success?
Well, the biggest concerns we had were kind of right up front, which is, would people feel comfortable having their professional, what they've done professionally, their resume, so to speak, available for lots of people to see, because that was kind of unheard of. So that was a big risk. We weren't sure if people would feel comfortable with that. And also, a lot of people guarded their Rolodex, their contacts, very closely. And so we weren't sure would people sort of feel comfortable exposing them. And now we try to make it in a way that it's not sort of for everyone to see, what contacts you have. So we kind of put that into the design. But I think those were the biggest risks that we saw, especially at the beginning when you have a network. There's not that much value because that's not that many people on there. So the early phases, I think, were the most difficult ones. But we knew that once you have sort of a network there and those behaviors, people say, oh, it's normal. Other people have a profile too, and you connect with other people. It's sort of accepted behavior. Then if you are the one who has the most members, then even if you don't have the best features, people will generally come to your network and will continue to grow. And the more people are on it, the more attractive it gets to others. So it becomes kind of a snowball effect. So I think the most critical stages were kind of in the first year.
If you were to advise a person, a LinkedIn user now, which I understand a lot of people, they get on LinkedIn, but they don't really understand how to work it to their advantage. What would you say the number one thing is that a person can do to really strengthen their network and make LinkedIn work for them?
Well, I think there's two things. One thing is to make sure that your LinkedIn network reflects your true network of professional contacts. So that means, on the one hand, not linking with people you just met at a conference once, right? They have to be the kind of people you'd be willing in real life to introduce to each other, because then those relationships are meaningful. And that's when their contacts really matter to you, because there's that trust. But you also need to make sure you have as many of those on there as possible. If you're only connected to 10% of your true business contacts, you're really missing out on opportunities. The second one is related to that, which is, I recommend you think about some business problem that you have, whether you're trying to get a business partner, or you're trying to find some kind of expertise, someone who has a certain expertise, that you do a search, for someone that you don't know. So you don't type in a name, which is what a lot of people do. Before a meeting, they type in John Smith and look up John Smith and see where they went to school and what other companies they worked to. But that's nice, but that's not really a breakthrough. But what helps you with your business problems is saying you're looking for someone who has expertise in artificial intelligence applied to the automotive sector. You just type those keywords in and you find all the people who have that expertise based on their profiles. And then often I narrow the search to people in my second degree, which means we share common contacts. We both know a certain person, which makes it a lot easier then to reach that person by, getting introduced.
So what's the best, so I want to move into the other projects that you're working on today. What other projects are you involved with in your professional?
So I've got a couple of things. I've got my partner at Early Bird, and then do a lot of mentoring, kind of my pro bono stuff at Stanford, and then I'm on some independent boards. So a lot of startups have a board where there's a couple investors, a couple people from management, and they usually like to bring in one director who's kind of independent of the two. So two that might be interesting to talk a little bit about are kind of related to LinkedIn. One is kind of a LinkedIn for military staff, the people, the soldiers, the servicemen who are actively serving our country. And then the other one are doctors. And they both have in common that, these groups are not very engaged on LinkedIn, because to them it doesn't, LinkedIn feels like a business network, and doctors don't really think of themselves as business people. And soldiers don't think of themselves as business people. So they have different needs, they need a different profile, they need different kinds of things, and they really want to connect with each other. So, what I've learned is that LinkedIn is not serving those audiences well, but these two companies, Doximity and RallyPoint, are doing, quite a good job, and you can actually do much more. The more you focus on a certain area, you can sort of cater to that group much better than if you have to provide, a network that works for all.
I've noticed on your LinkedIn, as you go through your profile, you put it out there that you love to help mentor startup companies and that you have a whole process. You want to talk a little bit about how does a person reach you to do some mentoring if they have a product that they think is disruptive in nature and really fits where your expertise is?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, when a lot of people find when they have had some success or become known for something that they really want to help lots of people, but it's sort of like my heart says yes, but my calendar says no. There's a limit of time because you also want to have time for your family and some fun and other things. So I do have kind of a prioritization process, and I let people know directly on my LinkedIn profile because a lot of people do look at my profile before they reach out to me, and let them know in advance what are the kinds of people and how you reach out to me so that they can decide for themselves, well, is this a fit? So one of the rules is to which is, I've always done that before LinkedIn, is when someone comes referred to me through someone that I know, who knows the other person, then those are generally the ones that I focus on because I know that person puts their reputation on the line, and they also have some knowledge, whether that's sort of a person I would get along with and I'd find interesting. When someone just reaches out cold, that's pretty much a long shot.
Mm-hmm. Konstantin, appreciate you being on today's show. Been visiting with Konstantin Guericke, and if a person, the best way to reach you is through your LinkedIn profile?
Sure, on LinkedIn, if you find a common contact. I'm also on Twitter. You can try to tweet me, but again, if I don't really know, what you want and how it fits into the things that I describe, but those are social media are usually the best ways to reach me. Again, my email gets very crowded and it's very difficult to keep track of that.
Well, thanks for being on today's show.
Okay.